You know, for some people, faith isn't something you just find. It's something that gets forged. In the heat of persecution, under pressure you and I can barely imagine, some convictions don't break. They harden, like steel in a blacksmith's fire. All right, so let's dive into this incredible story of endurance. We're going to look at how the very first believers in Makkah dealt with trials that, let's be honest, would break most of us. And we'll see how that immense pressure created this legacy of patience that has echoed down through the centuries. In our first story, it starts so fittingly in a blacksmith's forge. This is the story of a man whose faith was tested by the very tools of his trade. So let me introduce you to Khabbaab ibn Al-Arat. Now, he was a skilled blacksmith, but here's the thing about Makkah's society back then. It was all about your tribe. And Khabbaab, he didn't have a powerful clan to protect him. So when he embraced Islam, he became, well, a really easy target. And the persecution was, it was brutal. We're talking intensely physical. The sources tell us his tormentors would heat up stones in a fire, scorching hot, and then just force him to lie down on them. They say years later he could show his back and it was just covered with these deep pits from the burns. Just imagine that. But here's where the story gets this really cruel twist of irony. His tormentor, a woman named Ammar, would take a heated piece of iron from his own forge and press it right onto his head. Think about that. The very tools he used to build and create were being used to torture him. But then, the story takes this unbelievable turn. Not long after this, Ammar gets hit with this awful ailment. A pain in her head so intense, the sources literally say she would howl like a stray dog. Just unbelievable pain. So people are looking for a cure, right? And what was the recommended treatment for this kind of thing back then? Cauterization. Yeah, searing the skin with a hot iron, the exact same thing she did to Khabbaab, was now being prescribed as her only hope for relief. She had to find a blacksmith to do it. And you can probably see where this is headed, can't you? Who in all of Makkah is she gonna ask to perform this deeply ironic procedure? You guessed it, Khabbaab himself. At her request, he took that heated piece of iron and cauterized the head of the very woman who had tortured him. It's a staggering moment of reversal, a kind of divine justice you just can't make up. So you have to ask yourself, right, how could anyone endure that? This kind of patience, it's more than just human grit. It was rooted in a very specific spiritual teaching. Let's dig into the promise that made all of this possible. At one point, Khabbaab has just pushed his absolute limit. He goes to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and just pleads with him, "Will you not ask for help for us? Will you not pray to God for us?" You can just feel the desperation in that question, can't you? Well, the Prophet's reaction is powerful. His face reportedly turned red. He sat up and basically gave them a history lesson in endurance. He told them about believers from long before them, people who were literally sawn in half, or had their flesh scraped from their bones with iron combs, and yet none of it turned them away from their faith. He was completely reframing their suffering for them. So here's the key takeaway. He was teaching them that there's a divine pattern to this, a path that all the prophets had walked. First, you get the severe trial, right? A test that pushes you to your absolute limit. Then, you reach a point of near despair. And it's only then, at that darkest moment, that divine help finally arrives. And this isn't just a story. This pattern is laid out right in the Qur'an. It talks about that exact moment when even the messengers started to lose hope. And then came to them our help. The lesson was crystal clear. Victory isn't promised when things get a little tough. It's promised at the very edge of despair. Okay, so this whole idea of endurance, it wasn't just about gritting your teeth and bearing torture. It also showed up as this proactive, almost defiant courage. Which brings us to the story of Abdullah ibn Mas'ood. Now, Abdullah, he was the complete opposite of some big, intimidating warrior. The sources describe him as this skinny, young shepherd, but he had a totally different kind of strength. So one day, the early believers are talking amongst themselves, wondering who could possibly be brave enough to go and recite the Qur'an out loud, right in front of the powerful chiefs of Makkah. And Abdullah, the most unlikely guy in the room, just says, "I'll do it." And he does. He walks right up to the Kaaba, the very heart of Makkah, and in this clear, strong voice,
He starts reciting from the chapter Ar-Rahman, the most beneficent, has taught the Qur'an. I mean, this was just a completely unprecedented act of public defiance. You can imagine the reaction. It was instant and it was violent. The chiefs just stared for a second, like they couldn't believe it, and then they jumped him, beating him brutally. But get this. Even as they're hitting him, he keeps reciting. He finishes as much of the chapter as he possibly can. So he goes back to his friends, his face all bruised and bleeding, and they're like, this is exactly what we were afraid of. But his response, it's just incredible. He says, the enemies of Allah were never more insignificant to me than they are right now. And if you want, I will go back and do the exact same thing tomorrow. The physical beating actually made his spiritual resolve stronger.
All right, our last story today is about a different kind of test. This one wasn't about the body. It was about the conscience. It's the story of a man who had total safety and chose to give it all up. This was Uthmaan ibn Mas'ood. Now, he was in a really unique spot. He had the official protection of a powerful chief, which basically meant he was untouchable. Nobody could harm him. He was safe. But that safety started to feel like a heavy weight, because every single day he had to watch his friends, his fellow believers, being tortured. And eventually, he just couldn't take it anymore. He said to himself that it was a great defect in his character to be walking around safe and sound while his companions were suffering so much. So he walks up to the chief and he renounces his protection. He gives it back. And then he announces to everyone, publicly, that he's now just like any other Muslim, with no special protection. He chose solidarity over safety. Just think about that choice.
And sure enough, not long after, he's in a public place and someone strikes him, injuring one of his eyes. The chief, who used to protect him, sees this happen, and he goes up to him and offers to give him his protection back. But Uthman's reply, this is really the heart of the lesson. He says, no, my good eye is in need of the same honor that afflicted its sister in the way of Allah. For him, suffering for his faith wasn't something to run away from, it was an honor. So when you put these three stories together, what do you get? You get this powerful picture of what it really means to have a conviction that's been forged in fire, not just found. From Khabbaab, the blacksmith, we learn about true patience, that ability to endure unbelievable physical pain, all because you trust it's part of a bigger, divine plan. From Abdullah the shepherd, we see what real courage looks like, the strength to stand up and speak your truth, even when you're physically outmatched and all the odds are against you. And from Uthmaan, the nobleman, we learn about sacrifice, the principle of choosing to give up your own comfort, your own safety, just to stand with those who are suffering for a cause you share. You see, these weren't just some kind of superhuman individuals. They were products of a teaching that trained them to look beyond the pain of right now and to focus on a much bigger promise. Their patience, it wasn't just sitting back and taking it. No, it was active, it was hopeful. And in its own way, it was completely defiant. And so that leaves us with a pretty big question, doesn't it? In our world today, a world that is so obsessed with comfort, with avoiding pain at all costs, what is the value of a belief you're actually willing to suffer for? What does that even mean to us now?